Good morning, everybody. Today is December 4th, and it's a Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, everybody. This is the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens Black Table Talk podcast. And we got a very special guest this morning. Normally we're in the afternoon, but today we are in the morning, which is good. The early bird gets the worm. And what we're going to do, we're going to go around the table, and we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to save our special guest for last. So who do we have to my left?
Hi, I'm Macy Leifer. I'm with the National Reentry Network.
Okay, Macy. Yes, you are. Welcome back again. I know my other, cohort. Who is this guy?
Hi, I'm Foster Sells. I'm also with the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens as well.
That's my partner in crime, y'all. He's always here with me. I'm Travis Register, and our special guest, we saved her for last. What is your name?
I'm Melissa Wasser. I'm a policy counsel at the ACLU of DC.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. How you doing today, Melissa?
Doing well. How are you, Travis?
I'm doing pretty good. Guess what? We're going to dive right off into this thing, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a policy counsel over at the ACLU of DC. We're the DC affiliate of the National ACLU, where we use integrated advocacy to push for civil rights and civil liberties for everybody who works in, lives, and visits the District of Columbia. We work on issues like DC statehood, criminal legal reform, work on reproductive justice, voting rights, you name it, we do it. So.
Oh, you on it. Yeah, you definitely on it. How long have you been with the organization?
It'll be 2 years in April. So going on 2 years.
Okay, so you're, I wouldn't say you're a rookie cookie, but you're seasoned now.
Yeah, seasoned, new to the district advocacy, but did federal lobbying for about 5 years before that.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Foster, what you got for us?
So, yeah, thank you for coming in today, Melissa. It's been great so far just getting to know a little bit about your background. So, of course, today we're here to talk about Unlock the Box and Erase Solitary Confinement. For our listeners who may not know, can you explain how ACLU and your organization got involved with the Unlock the Box campaign?
Yeah, totally. So Unlock the Box is a national advocacy campaign to end solitary confinement at all U.S. prisons, jails, all detention facilities, juvenile facilities within 10 years. And ACLU DC was brought in as a coalition partner to Unlock the Box a few years ago. So there's a national movement, and then there's also individual chapters. So ACLU DC is part of Unlock the Box DC, trying to end solitary in the District of Columbia.
Nice. So, of course, this is like a call to duty, as Mr. Register would say.
Like you say.
For us to really act on this policy. Yeah. What are some of the things that we need to know about the Solitary Confinement Act and how it relates to our advocacy work here in D.C.?
Sure, and just to highlight the coalition itself, it has advocacy organizations, but it also is a community-first model, so it's empowering especially survivors of solitary confinement and their families to get involved in the process and share their stories and give a little bit of a narrative to what's actually going on in these facilities. And so there's a bill at the DC Council called the Erase Solitary Confinement Act. Like you mentioned, it would prohibit almost all forms of segregated confinement for people who are incarcerated at DOC facilities in DC. It would also make sure that they would limit the use of safe cells, meaning that also residents would get, I think it's 8 hours of time outside their cell every day mandated to make sure that they're not just sitting away in a cell for 23 hours a day, coming out once a day. And so we want to make sure, too, that DOC Department of Corrections has good oversight in this process. If you ask DOC right now how many people are in solitary confinement, they'll say, well, we don't use solitary confinement, but that's not actually the case. We want to make sure with this bill that DOC provides folks mental health services if they're placed in prolonged confinement, like a safe cell, and also in case someone gets sick and they need to isolate them, they would be able to go into isolation for medical reasons, but again, they still have that 8 hours out of cell time.
Yeah, so it seems very important that they kind of follow these guidelines that we just talked about here, because if a person is being treated unfairly and placed in solitary confinement, of course it can have adverse effects on the person.
Yeah, I mean, it's amounted to torture at the UN, right? So, I mean, it's inhumane, it's cruel, it exacerbates mental health problems, exacerbates physical health problems, and we want to make sure that no person has to go through this anymore. We've heard from many survivors and many families of survivors of solitary confinement, not only the impact it has on them, but with the families, how relationships change. When folks get out of solitary and eventually, reenter into society, you know, they don't have the resources, they don't have the support systems that they had going in because they've been isolated for so long.
And what she means by that is that when individuals are in the box, because they call it unlock the box for a reason, because you're in the cell, you don't come out, you're actually in a box, and there's not a whole lot you can do in there, but you just exist in there. But when you don't have the interaction of another human being, when you have limited books, and when you don't have any radio or anything, you're just listening to the noises that may be outside that cell. In prison, they call it being burnt out mentally. But it's actually, you know, a mental illness. So when they come out, it's like, okay, they've been separated from everything that they will make them exist, or not exist, but live, you know, a normal life. If you're not in contact with your family members, you barely getting mail, and you're not able to go on visits, you're not even able to contact with other, or communicate with other inmates that are within that, you know, that system or that compound or that facility, you're going to be messed up. So when Melissa says that when they come out, they don't know how to, you know, coexist with, you know, their own family members, because they've been so separated, and their mind has changed. They may go in one person, but they come out another person. So I got a question for you too. How did this whole Unlock the Box campaign, how did it originate?
Yeah, so we got connected actually with some other groups in DC, mainly DC Justice Lab, and got together and did some coalition meetings. And this was prior to my time starting at the ACLU, but I know when I started on, Unlock the Box was one of the first coalitions I was involved with and introduced to. And now it's spread out to a bunch of different organizations. We have some national organizations coming in and helping. We had a great, this bill that at the DC Council just got reintroduced. So last council period, we had a different sponsor who has now left the DC Council. And so a lot of the work behind the scenes was figuring out, okay, what did we like about last year's bill? What didn't we like? And then who could we find as a sponsor for this new bill moving forward? So I know last year we had a bill that dealt with both DOC facilities for adults and also juvenile facilities for youth. And so this new bill only handles DOC facilities for adults at the moment. But again, it's a tiered approach, right? It's a step-by-step process that we're trying to get something in place first and then kind of expand it out. But we got connected through DC Justice Lab and, you know, groups like Harriet's Wildest Dreams. And, you know, we've been in that coalition space ever since.
And we always shout out, you know, DC Justice Lab, because they do amazing work. You know, they're our neighbors on this floor, and they're you know, they're great people. You know, very passionate about the work for returning citizens, and also individuals who are waiting to become returning citizens. So, yeah, Macy, what you got for us?
Yeah, so I read the report that the ACLU published, Breaking Through Isolation, and something that I found really interesting in it was the fact that it repeated throughout the report was the idea that the more that DC voters were educated about this issue, the more that they became opposed to solitary confinement. So it seems like it's definitely an education campaign. How are we getting the word out? Like, how are we making sure that we're voting for the right people who are supporting this policy? Yeah,
that definitely. So, I mean, as you mentioned, we have a report, Breaking Through Isolation, the urgent case for the Erase Solitary Confinement Act. And we did a poll at ACLU DC that looked at likely 2024 general election voters. More than half of DC voters support ending solitary confinement. I think we're at about 55% there. More voters oppose the use of solitary than support it in all regions, all wards across the city. And so right now what we're trying to do is we use an integrated advocacy approach at ACLU DC. So it's not just our lawyers going to court. It's not just our organizers in the community or us doing advocacy at the council. It's also about public education, like you said. So getting this report out there, sharing it widely with your networks is super important, because I don't think people even knew what the numbers were of the support for something like this. And again, like you mentioned, we had different questions that gave people more of an insight about what solitary confinement actually does to a person. And as they learned more about it and how the effects of solitary confinement would impact public safety, that number went, like you said, 55, it jumped up to 70% of DC voters. And so what I would say is look at the bill online, see who the sponsors are, and see who is your council member in your ward. And if they're not supporting the bill, you can always reach out to them and say, hey, there's a bill right in front of you right now. Why don't you support it and co-sponsor it, and let's get it a hearing so we can move it forward.
Call your representatives.
Yep, exactly.
A lot of work goes into this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a team effort, right? Like we need everybody, and it's just extremely important that people are paying attention to these local laws that impact more of their day to day. I know people say oh, the president or Congress, but here in D.C. we have a council and a mayor that are trying to make laws and try to do certain things that might not agree with where you're at, or in this case, you want to end solitary confinement. There's a bill in front of you. Let's move it forward and let them know how you feel.
What you think about that, Foster?
Yeah, that's very important. I think it is definitely something that we should, like Macy was saying, educate the general public on. It's unfair that you have constituents who are being represented by city council not take the issue serious. When you have a report that the ACLU produced that says taxpayer dollars aren't being well spent on solitary confinement, right? Yep. So the issue is, what are we looking at here? We're looking at recidivism when they come out of solitary confinement. We're looking at mental health issues when they come out of solitary confinement, when they get released from jail. And that's a public safety issue, right? So we want to do something about that.
When we're talking about the institutions and holding them up to some type of accountability, and when they say that, okay, we don't use isolation in our institutions, that's a lie. So, I mean, every institution across the country has a segregated unit.
Right.
And sometimes these segregated units don't have surveillance cameras and stuff in it.
Right.
And a lot of time, the box that they're in is those areas that don't have a camera, because that's a place where they use them for torture or some type of abuse, or just pure neglect. How do we go about, or how have y'all gone about holding these institutions and these COs and the wardens and AWs accountable for what they're saying that they don't have?
Yeah, and I know it's not the sexiest part of government, but the DC Council has an oversight season where every single agency gets in front of the council, and the council asks questions of them and asks them what's been going on that past year and asks for information and data, and then we get that information and data and we can comb through it and see, okay, last year you said you didn't have anybody in solitary, but then later you reported you had this many people in isolation or in a segregated unit, right? And so what we saw, especially during COVID, I mean, there were 1,500 people held in lockdown for, I think it was over 500 days.
Right.
Yep.
And the whole point was, let's hold these people so that we don't spread COVID. But didn't give them PPE, didn't give them any protection from what is a virus and it's going around, right? And so the lockdown, you had 1,500 people by themselves for 500 days. And I mean, I know we went through, people were isolating at home, but you talked to somebody.
Right.
You had conversations with your family. You ate healthy food. You had running water. Your showers were working, right? Like, there's all these conditions at the DC jail that just compound on top of each other and make it an even worse experience for somebody to go through. And it didn't even stop the spread of COVID. They had the highest spread of COVID caused by mass incarceration. So we got to think differently about how we're doing this to actually protect people. Because again, the conditions inside the jail are also horrendous. So you add that on top of a lockdown, and I mean, it's going to make everything worse, not better.
Right.
Yeah, government oversight is definitely important. We can't just allow city council and politicians to get away with saying one thing and doing something else, right? I know that our organization, the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens, was recently at the Unlock the Box rally at the Wilson Building, right? So we were there in coalition with ACLU, DC Justice Lab, and you name it. And so one of the things we heard were a lot of personal stories and testimonies explaining the conditions that they were faced with during that time period of COVID and beyond, and how the unfair treatment was basically at play. But we were trying to really get city council to act as far as oversight, right? You're saying you're not doing this, but this is what we just heard testimonies live and in person that says something contrary to that. So we've got to, like you were saying, think about this differently and hold city council accountable for their actions.
And also during oversight season, for people listening, you can testify. You can sign up and tell them what you what's on your mind and what you care about. So if you see that the Department of Corrections is having an oversight hearing and you want to hear about solitary confinement and say this bill hasn't moved when it comes in a couple months, you can go up and say, I care about solitary confinement. I want this bill to get a hearing. I want you to advance this bill to end solitary confinement in the district. And there's ways for people to get involved, because if people aren't involved and people don't tell their council members how they're feeling or what they care about, they only hear from people in the room. And so you too can be in that room.
Right.
And your voice and your opinion on this, it matters. I mean, like Foster said about the narratives we heard, the folks that went through solitary that were doing the advocacy day with us in the different offices, I mean, it was so powerful that they had gone through this, they had gone through these horrendous conditions, and yet here they are sharing that story so they can stop someone else from going through it. That's one of the most powerful things you can do, is share your voice and share your story, and everybody can do it. You can sign up as soon as the link goes live on the council website here in DC.
One thing about jail and prison is that the individuals that actually go through solitary or just being in the segregation part of it, is that if you're in that culture for a while, it's normal. Okay, I got in a fight, or I was being disobedient, and not listening to a direct order to the staff. I go to this place, and it just seems normal. And you deal with it the best way you know how. And a lot of times you don't realize the mental effect that it's having on yourself. But the people that's on the outside who realizes off the break, when you come home or you're dealing with, hey, something's wrong with you, you're not the same. So it's needed for the individual who's been through it to testify and speak from personal experience, but also the individuals who watch how he or she has changed. That way you have both dynamics. It's like, okay, well, he's just putting on. No, he's not just putting on because he was in prison. You have a family member or a loved one, or even a friend that says the same thing. Hey, he's not the same, or she is not the same, because he used to be like this and she used to be like this, and now it's hard for him to even cope. So it's both testimony. I just jumped on that, Melissa, because that's it's needed for both parties on each side to come and testify to let DC Council know, man, this is a very serious thing that needs to be taken care of. And if you're taking care of dogs and cats and all these different animals, make sure they're rescued and get the proper care that they need during a pandemic like COVID. But you got all these men and these women. You got 1,500 people. That's that's bigger than some towns.
Right.
So you have a town of people who are sick and is not getting the proper treatment and care that is needed during a pandemic. So you pretty much just throw them in the bucket and say, well, all y'all the same anyway. So okay, and you had a body count on CNN daily during the pandemic, or who's dying and who's been affected, things of that manner. But you never seen anything about what was going on in prison.
Right.
Yeah.
AWs and lieutenants and sergeants, they wasn't coming into the units and see what was going on because they were scared to catch it. Oh, they'll be okay. So now you have a whole facility with 1,500 people. Now they're suffering from mental health, maybe some from minimal cases to maximal cases, to where individuals need to get on medication and maybe even go to Springfield, Butner for a mental evaluation.
Yeah, it's neglect. It's cruel and unusual punishment. And I think also something that is interesting is the fact that it's not usually a proportional response to what someone actually does.
Right.
Like, to get into solitary confinement, like the report talked about how sometimes it was just because they talked back to a correctional officer, not like because it was a violent incident.
The power imbalance alone, right? Like you don't know what version of a CO you're going to get that day. And if someone's mad or upset, or you say the wrong thing, you turn the wrong way, you respond in what they think is the wrong way, off you go.
Yep.
And who knows when you're going to come back. And again, we're talking about people. 1,500 people. When you're like, that's maybe a town, I'm thinking, that's half the size of my hometown. I'm from a very small village of like 3,000 people. That'd be half my hometown in isolation for 500 days.
Wow.
We're talking about human beings that need comfort, need support, need nutrition, need that person-to-person contact. Like, you can't just put someone in a box and throw away the key, and it's just adding levels of trauma onto an already traumatic experience.
I would agree with that. And one of the things I was just sitting here thinking about is that instead of spending taxpayer dollars on the use and practice of solitary confinement, what about those who can, like you were saying, come out and testify at the oversight hearing, right? We have family members who are also affected by this as well, who have not been able to reach out to their family members while they're behind bars or experiencing solitary confinement because they're cut off from the outside world. That has major mental health effects on that individual as a family member trying to reach out to their, loved one behind bars. And at the same time, they can do something about that, like you were saying, Melissa, which is to testify about the cruel and unusual punishment that is being, brought upon their loved one.
Yeah, and making sure too that the family members, everybody really has accessible ways to testify, because you might be homebound and you can't make it to a council building, and we have virtual options. People can now call a number, I think, and give testimony on the phone for up to, I think it's like 3 to 5 minutes. You can just call a number, leave a voicemail. That's as easy as calling someone up and saying, hey, let's have a conversation, 3 to 5 minutes. Let's talk about how this impacted you. And, you can pick up the phone. But I think it's just really important that people realize the human impact of what this does to people. Because it's just absolutely horrendous. Like you said, it's cruel and unusual punishment. It's inhumane. And it has no place in the district.
This is we are without excuse, especially in this day of technology. If you can't be there in person, you just said you can call a number and you can testify or give your point of view for 5 minutes. If you can't get your thing across in 5 minutes, then how much more do you need? But we're without excuse. Whether it be from email, whether it be in person, or whether it be over the phone, it can be done. So what's stopping us? I think I said this one time before, is that pretty much everybody in the United States, across this country, is affected. Every household is affected by somebody who's been incarcerated. And if they've been incarcerated, pretty much they've probably been in isolation as well. And Melissa, where does it stop? Okay, after or where do we go from testifying? As we go to city council and we're pushing this bill and things like that, where do we go after that?
Yeah, well, so we're talking about oversight season. So when oversight season comes up, when people care about, the Department of Corrections, that's when you got to go testify, right? Right now we have a bill. We have, I think it's 8 sponsors total. There's 13 people on the council, so you're over 50% of the council are sponsoring Erase Solitary, which is a great increase from last year, which is awesome. It has been referred to the Judiciary Committee. So the Judiciary Committee chair, Brooke Pinto, who's in Ward 2, has the control of whether that bill will get a hearing. So the next step is to ask Chair Pinto for a hearing. And we talked about the report a little bit. I'll also just mention we looked at that chair's ward in Ward 2, and 54% of voters in Ward 2 opposed the use of solitary confinement. So again, it's still more than half in that specific ward. And so knowing that, it's up to people to reach out to that office and reach out to that committee and say, hey, this bill is really important. We would love for you to schedule a hearing. And that's what we did a little bit on the rally day and the advocacy day. Was we had a rally out front with a lot of people sharing their stories, a lot of people talking. We talked about the report. We talked about the impact this has on people. And our main ask was to ask for a hearing. So if that gets a hearing, then you have another chance to testify in support of the bill. And what I'll say is testimony matters, but numbers matter. The amount of people, we're seeing that right now with the public safety bills and the crime bills at the council. A lot of people feel very passionately about it. And so you see a long list of people testifying, but we should also have a long list of people testifying to show that we should end the use of solitary confinement. Right. And I think we can do it, but we have to get moving on it in the next year, because the council period will end next December, and we got to make sure that we get a hearing, the bill gets marked up, and they can vote and pass it so it becomes law.
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's an uphill battle, but we can do it. And I know that DC voters, because they support it, that they can help us, and y'all can help us. We can do it too.
So down there at the rally, we had 2 discussions prior to you coming in, kind of like unprofessional type discussions. Actually, just having just like casual talk about what actually went on. Well, we had a pre-talk about what the rally was going to be about. Then we had a post-rally talk with Mr. Damon Jones, because he spoke down there, and then Mr. Jonas Smith, and then Mr. Foster, they was down there partaking as well. And we was talking about the lack of participants in the rally. And something as heavy and something as important as this is, okay, well, if everybody's affected by this across the country, you know, and DC is a spot where, you know, it's a platform where you can come and show up at the Wilson Steps, man, and you can put on for however long as you want to. And it was said that, because I was here, I wasn't there, so in the beginning there was a lot of police officers down there.
There were, yes.
And they were, so if there's a lot of police officers down there, they were expecting a big crowd, and there wasn't. So how did that make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely jarring to see a line of police officers kind of just like posted up outside the Wilson building. I don't know if it was for the rally. I don't know if it was pure coincidence. I truly don't know, but the optics weren't great, right? Like you walked up ready to talk about ending solitary confinement, and you're met with a line of police officers who eventually went across the street and then eventually left, which was very, very weird. But I mean, I think the main thing for me is making sure that we have a wide net and a wide network of folks who, like you said, are coming out to participate and be in that rally and make sure that they get their voice heard. You know, we can always reach out to more people, more networks, and that's the beginning, right? Like the rally was the beginning. We still have a great opportunity ahead of us to get more people to testify, to get more people to sign up online, to send a message to their council member, to let them know how they feel about it. I just think I think it might have been an unfortunate coincidence, but again, like we talked about earlier, the power imbalance was there, and you definitely felt that coming into the rally when, you know, we were trying to get people on the stairs or trying to get people in the speaking order. But like I said, it's just the beginning for the rally. I think we can still get this word out. I mean, obviously the podcast is going to reach a huge number of folks.
Right.
You know, people can come to DC anytime they want. And if we, you know, we plan it and we have a date, you know, you can also testify virtually, right? And so there's ways to still be involved and increase the net of people that we bring into this process and keep it moving forward.
Yeah, the Unlock the Box campaign is national, and I'm so glad that it's here in D.C. as well, and we are taking it very seriously, and we're working on trying to pass the Erase Solitary Confinement Act, But I wanted to just say that those optics of maybe trying to intimidate returning citizens was a piss poor job on the police department's part. That's not how you come in coalition with what's going on as far as inhumane treatment towards our fellow brothers and sisters behind bars, right? Experiencing this. And those numbers that we reported as far as doing what was going on during COVID is very haunting. So to have that type of police presence maybe was a deterrent for people to come out and experience what they needed to experience as far as being a part of the rally, which is just not helpful at all. It's quite shameful. But to Melissa's point, we still have the opportunity to contact our city council, contact your local representative within your ward, and see if they can hold a hearing on this bill so we can get the ball rolling and get that bill passed. I think Brooke Pinto, her staff did meet with us that day at the rally, Mr. Register, but it was just a step, right? So there's more work to be done.
A lot more. Can you add more to that, Melissa? As far as like, you know, just the process, and it's almost like when a child, when they want something from their parents,
Right.
and they're persistent,
Yeah.
and they keep going, and to the point you're like, all right, I'm gonna get it for you already. So that we have to have that same type of persistence when it comes to getting this bill passed.
Yeah, and I think it's highlighting the stories of folks who have gone through it, the families that have had to endure it. I mean, you talked about it wastes taxpayer dollars, and it's talking to your representative, your council member, maybe talk to your ANCs as well. There's a lot of ANCs that are very vocal with the council, advisory neighborhood commissioners here in DC. Some of them, when they have meetings, they pass resolutions that support legislation. That might also be helpful to kind of advancing it forward. And like Foster said, we did meet with Chair Pinto's staff, who seemed like they were supportive. But again, at the end of the day, the decision lies with Brooke Pinto to have a hearing. Again, just want to shout out Councilmember Brianna Nadeau here in Ward 1, who is the main sponsor of the bill and has been working with us for a while. And then, like I said, there's 8 total folks on the bill. So this does have momentum. Folks, if they go on the website and they see that their council member isn't on the bill, maybe reach out to your council member and educate them a little bit. I think what you talked about too with the intimidation factor at the rally, you know, there were folks there who were returning citizens and were, you know, afraid to come into the council building. I've heard that a couple times on a couple recent bills actually too, that folks are afraid they're going to come to the council building and get arrested or go back to jail, or, you know, something's going to happen. And I think what we need to do with that is better public education about what these bills are doing, how it's going to impact you, how it's going to impact your daily life. Because if we, and I say we, not only as ACLU DC, but also Unlock the Box DC, if we can't get our message out effectively and let people know what the potential consequences are, or debunk some of the misinformation that happens at the rallies or the hearings, like, you know, then we're not being good advocates and we're not doing the best job we can. So the best thing we can do is to talk to people, to expand that network, to let them know this bill was introduced. That's a great first step. But we need a hearing, and we need your help in securing a hearing and then testifying in support of the bill once it gets heard at judiciary.
So the work doesn't stop
No, it
until
does
it
not.
stops.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very so. Melissa, we before we close out, I just want to know if there's any closing remarks you want to give us. You know, just to let the world know from your heart how passionate you are and what needs to be done. I mean, even if you need to chastise us for, you know, for the lack of work that's being done with this advocacy, you know, to do so. But please unleash the fire.
No, never. The work that's been done here has been incredible, and I'm thankful to Foster and the folks in the National Reentry Network, also the Unlock the Box Coalition here in DC, and again, ACLU DC is pushing for the civil rights and civil liberties of everybody in the district, and that includes folks who are behind bars, who are dealing with being in solitary confinement. And again, we know the data shows DC supports this. We know from experience, people who endure solitary confinement, like we mentioned, have those big hits to mental health and physical health. And, you know, it's good to know that there's folks in other states that have ended solitary confinement, that they now realize how much money they've wasted, how much of a terrible impact this has on folks' lives, on their health, and are using that to kind of push forward, hey, this should be outlawed nationwide. That's why they're involved with Unlock the Box nationally. And here in DC, again, we're going to get it done, but we need folks' help. And, you know, this is something that isn't just going to be swept under the rug. We need folks holding everybody accountable, have the council ask questions of the Department of Corrections, and really push them to show that they shouldn't be using solitary confinement, and it has zero place in the district. If we're going to be a real just and free city, we can't have solitary confinement in our ranks.
I absolutely agree with what you just said, Melissa, and I want to personally thank you for coming in and speaking with us today.
Thank
it means
you.
a lot.
Yeah, of course.
And you have our support here at the Reentry Network.
Appreciate y'all. Appreciate all that y'all are doing.
Macy?
Thank you. I've really enjoyed listening to all of that.
It's great.
Thank you for your passionate work. I like to say that when people like you are coming in from the ACLU as far and DC Justice Lab and us and everybody else who out there and advocating, I like to say that our work is working.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's action. It's like when you tell somebody you love them. Okay, you say it out your mouth, but you know what's behind that.
Right.
So as advocacy, that's what we're doing. While we're standing in the middle and we're pulling this end and that end together, you know, to make it work. So we gotta make our work. That's what advocacy is. So, you know, a high five. Thank you for your work. You good. That's what, hey, we here.
We're here.
And then this is live. So this is what we do. You know, no bloopers in here.
I love it.
So,
I love it.
You have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And we look to have you back again.
Absolutely.
We'd like to
Whenever you
thank Foster for reaching out to Melissa, to coming out here and sharing, giving us some good information and fueling us to do more advocacy. And not only advocacy, but just, you know, I mean, you have to have a heart for this type of work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough work, right? But again, if you can make this place a little bit better than when you found it, it's worth it. So we just got to keep that. And again, it's you're beating the drum for a while. It's not just a short thing. You got to keep pushing to get the work done.
Keep doing what you're doing, Melissa.
Appreciate it.
This is the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizen Black Table Talk podcast. We're signing off, but we're never signing out because we are always at work. Y'all do good.